Hey guys, welcome back to Bytesector. Cell phones are an integral part of our daily life. We use them to browse the internet, check our email, monitor, and post to our social media feeds. So with the annual release schedules from the likes of Apple, Samsung, LG, Motorola, Huawei, and Google, how long should you really be holding onto your phone for? So I'm the kind of guy who upgrades a smartphone every 2 to 3 years. I started with the original iPhone back in 2007, moved to an iPhone 4 briefly in 2010 before I bricked it, and then I decided to give the Android platform a try. In December 2010 I purchased my first Android phone, the Nexus S. I moved to a Galaxy Nexus in 2012, the Nexus 6 in 2014, and then I waited 3 long years before moving to the Pixel 2 XL last November. So Chris, do you love your phone so much that you wouldn't let them go? The truth is, I loved almost every phone I purchased. Yes, almost. I came to passionately hate the Galaxy Nexus and the brand behind it. Let's start at the beginning. The original iPhone. My very first smartphone. I loved that phone. I still have it somewhere. It's in a closet. I'm not sure which one yet. If I find it, I will dig it out. I will show you guys. But for now, I don't have it for this video. The metal casing on that phone was amazing. It survived more than one fall from my waist. At the end of its lifetime, when I traded it in for the iPhone 4, it had one solitary small dent on the top right corner. That's it. The plastic wasn't cracked, I never replaced the screen. That phone was built to last. Kudos, Steve Jobs. You killed it. I know what some of you are thinking. You live in Canada. You know what? Yes, I drove down to the States to buy the iPhone. I couldn't wait for the iPhone 3G to come to Canada when Rogers finally got it. And yes, I did end up jailbreaking it and doing a carrier unlock so that I could use it north of the border. I chose to forego the iPhone 3G and iPhone 3GS because the value proposition for me really wasn't there. I had decided I didn't need to pay more money for 3G access to the internet. I only used the phone between point A and point B, and sometimes while I was at school. So I usually had access to Wi-Fi, and when I wasn't in a building with Wi-Fi, I was usually driving where you really shouldn't be using your cell phone, so it didn't bother me too much. I was doing some reading on the reviews of the 3G when it first came out. People were complaining that just pressure in their pockets was cracking the plastic. It wasn't for me. Then the iPhone 4 came out. The iPhone 4 changed everything for me. It introduced a faster CPU, better screen, and some of the best looks a smartphone has ever had at the time and arguably to this day. I think it was an overused design when it got added to the iPhone 5 and you know what, let's not get into it. I wanted that phone so bad that while I was on vacation in Germany in the summer of 2010, I hoped that it would get released in Germany so that I could buy it there and bring it back. It didn't. Then I ended up driving later in the year, driving down to the US, buying an AT&T locked iPhone 4 and bringing it back north of the border. And for a while, all was good. I loved my iPhone 4. It was an amazing phone. Unfortunately, I didn't get to use it as long as I wanted to because later in 2010, Apple released an update which, if you didn't do the upgrade properly, it bricked your phone or permanently locked it back to the provisioned carrier, which was AT&T at the time. So I screwed up. That's on me. That's not Apple's fault. It's not a failing of the iPhone 4, but I screwed up. I didn't wait long enough for it to back up the keys that I needed up to the cloud, and ultimately I locked that phone back to AT&T permanently. Ultimately, I had to find a new phone. I looked around a fair bit. I was a bit miffed at Apple and myself for bricking that iPhone 4. After a lot of research though, I decided to give Android a try. I'd read a lot of good things about it. I'd heard it was for the more technical folks and I wanted to see how true that was. And so I decided to take the plunge. Wanting the truest Android experience available to me though, I opted to go for the, at the time, very sleek Nexus S. I mean, look at this. Look how comically small it is compared to a modern day cell phone. In my hand, it doesn't even compare. I can't even believe I thought this was a nice phone, but it was at the time, and that's all that mattered to me back in 2010. I grew to love this phone. I liked it a lot. It worked well, and best of all, it was factory unlocked. So I never had to worry about bricking this phone or setting it back or worrying about replacing it because a new update came out and I screwed up the upgrade process. Like I'd never done that before. So the Nexus S didn't per se die, but on April 30th, 2012, the morning of actually, on my way to the hospital, the power button stopped working. No matter how I pressed it, how hard, how light, changed the angle, the screen wouldn't turn on. The only way to use the phone was to plug it into a charger to get the screen to turn on, and then I could unlock the screen. Completely impractical because if you're not beside a wall outlet and you don't carry your phone charger everywhere, which, let's be honest, who does? And you're not in the car, then you're pretty much shit out of luck. Pardon my language. It was very frustrating. It just became a lump of technology that I really couldn't use. So, a new phone search got kicked off. I finally settled on the Galaxy Nexus. It was the successor to the Nexus S, so that made sense to me. It ran Android 4, which I believe was Android Lollipop. It had a much bigger screen, it was thinner in size, and best of all, it was a Nexus device. I love those regular OS and security updates from Google, just like I'd had on my iPhones previously from Apple. The Galaxy Nexus was a great phone, but it suffered from some quality defects that I experienced not just with my single unit, but across multiple units. In less than a year, the power button was starting to fail again, in exactly the same manner that it failed on the Nexus S. It got to the point where if I didn't press the power button with enough force and at the right angle, it was essentially dead again. That really frustrated me. The other thing that frustrated me is, I know I kept my phone in my pocket with my car keys, but the silver paint on the back of this phone started to chip off, and on the sides and around the screen. And I mean, I was frustrated a bit because how hard is it to add the silver dye to the plastic instead of painting black plastic silver? So that was a knock on Samsung, and I didn't like it. I contacted Samsung corporate asking if they could renew my faith in the Samsung brand by sending something that was representative of the quality of Samsung cell phones. At the time, that was the Galaxy S3. Corporate said they'd gladly send me a replacement unit, replacing the Galaxy Nexus with an S3. At least until I sent them my address and corporate discovered that I didn't live in South Korea. Suddenly, I had to deal with Samsung Canada. Samsung Canada wasn't willing to give me an S3 at all. In fact, they barely were willing to replace my Galaxy Nexus with a Galaxy Nexus. To which I was a bit frustrated because I said, you know what, clearly there are defects in the Galaxy Nexus that I don't like. How are you going to renew my faith in the brand by sending me a phone I already think is defective? But let's not get into too much detail there. So, they sent me a brand new Galaxy Nexus. I took much better care of this one, as you can probably maybe see, is there are no paint chips on the silver paint. I did not keep my keys in the pocket with this cell phone at all. But upon arrival, took off the back. As you can see, phones back then had their own separate battery, so you stuck the battery in when you got the phone. I grabbed the battery, and you know what, I'm just going to rip it out of the old Galaxy Nexus here for a second. I took the battery, and I went to insert it. And as you can see here, this one's suffering from exactly the same problem. It didn't fit. The battery actually physically doesn't go into the compartment at all. So they sent me a brand new phone where the battery was useless to me. I ended up using the battery out of my old Galaxy Nexus because the new one was useless. And Samsung Canada wasn't willing to do anything about it afterwards. Tisk tisk, Samsung. I determined at that point that no matter what happened with this new Galaxy Nexus, I was done with Samsung as a brand, no matter how good the phones were. Because there are other options out there, just as nice as Samsung these days. I didn't need to go supporting a brand whose only, way of renewing my faith in the brand was sending me a phone that ultimately, 6 months later, started to have power button issues again on a second unit in the same line of phone, but overall third Samsung phone that I had been using in a row. I moved on when I could go no further with the Galaxy Nexus. I picked up the absolutely gigantic Nexus 6. This phone was a beast. People were calling it a phablet. Not even a phone, a phablet. It earned its own kind of class up there with the Note. It's got a massive 5.96 16:9 ratio screen, a beefy 3 gigs of RAM, which was a huge upgrade over the previous Galaxy Nexus. It came with a Snapdragon 805, which was a nice quad-core CPU, and 32 gigs of internal storage, which was double what I had with the Galaxy Nexus. 32 gigs was more than enough. I was set for life as far as I was concerned. So, Google's updates kept coming, I kept installing them. Surprisingly, the Google Nexus 6 got one last reprieve. It got the upgrade to Android version 7, which was unexpected and very welcome. So it went from Android 5, I believe, to 6, and then to 7, getting 3 major OS upgrades. Sorry, I had to think about that for a second. Running Android 7 Nougat, the phone gave me all it had, but ultimately the Pixel had already grabbed my interest. It was a beautiful looking phone, the specs were crazy, the OS looked nice, there were some really cool features, the camera kicked butt. It took a lot of willpower out of me not to go out and grab one instantly, especially with all my friends telling me how amazing it was. Rumors around the Pixel 2 though started up really early. When they started coming up, I put my desires in check and vowed that when the Pixel 2 launched, I would get a Pixel 2 XL. The Pixel XL was off the table in my mind. I didn't wait for the Pixel 2 to become available, I was actually one of the pre-orders. I pre-ordered a Pixel 2 XL for both myself and my wife, opting for the black model because I couldn't wait the extra 4 to 6 weeks for the very sexy white version. I figured, you know what, I'm going to be sticking a case over the back of it anyways. Am I really going to see the white 90% of the time? No. In fact, every phone's got a black front. I don't even notice that this has a black back. So, no loss, right? I've been using the Pixel 2 XL as my daily driver now for almost a full year. That brings us to today. I'm closing in on a year of usage with this phone, and with the Pixel 3 just around the corner, not that we haven't already had 1,000 leaks and pictures to cover every angle, but I like to think that Google's still got something in store for us at their upcoming event. I'm wondering, is it worth upgrading to the Pixel 3 XL or holding on to my Pixel 2 XL for another year or two? Well, let's address the biggest claimed issue with the Pixel 2 XL. At launch, the threat of screen burn-in after just a week of usage was huge. Media evaluation units were rampant and suffering burn-in like no tomorrow. The alarm bells were going off, people were saying this was a catastrophe, Google was done, they shouldn't bother making hardware anymore. At the time, Google released an update, a software update, but an update that they said would address the problem of the burn-in, or potential burn-in, not wanting to fully admit that there was a problem. The critics said that no software update's going to fix poor panel quality, and the problem was with the panels themselves, not the software on the phone. A year later, I can tell you, I don't have any screen burn-in. You know what? I actually have a gray image on here, so we're going to cut to that. Take a look at that. There's no burn-in. You pay attention to the bottom of the screen and the top of the screen where the notifications are at the top and the navigation buttons at the bottom. None of them are burned into the screen at all. There's no burn-in. There's no time displayed, no battery percentage, no circle, square, triangle at the bottom. So, burn-in wasn't an issue. Next, battery life. It's well documented across hundreds of smartphones and just devices in general that the more you charge a battery, the shorter its life becomes. I'm extremely thrilled to say that with the Pixel 2 XL, it still gets me on average a day and a half, and I'm not talking an average day and a half, I'm talking 36 hours of battery life on a single charge with about 4 hours of screen on time. Not too shabby, I'd say. Admittedly, the battery life was starting to drop over the summer down to the 24 to 28 hour range. But following an upgrade to Android Pie or Android version 9, battery life shot right back up due to the optimizations that Google has introduced in the latest version of their OS. I found that with the battery saver turned on, if I go from 100% turn battery saver on, the Pixel 2 XL to this day still lasts me over 50 hours on a single charge. I'm not saying that running with battery saver on all the time is the smartest choice or the most efficient or the most powerful choice for your cell phone, but after a year, I can still get a 50+ hour charge out of this cell phone? That's pretty freaking impressive. Being last year's phone, I still receive the latest software and security updates from Google and can expect one final upgrade next year to Android 10 or whatever it ends up being called. So I won't be left out in the cold until 2020 in terms of software updates and features that come with the new OS next year. So this all brings around the question, is it worth upgrading every year? I did about a 2 to 3 year refresh cycle, which was, I think, at the limit of my patience. You know, certainly the Nexus S, after 2 years, I was starting to get a bit frustrated, but just couldn't justify shelling out the money for another $500 or $600 phone until it died. The Galaxy Nexus, I got some extra life out of because they sent me a second unit, but ultimately, when the Nexus 6 launched, I just couldn't resist it. And then the Nexus 6 was a beefy phone with a big screen, the decent battery life that I needed until the last 6 months or so, and that was just me waiting and biding my time for the Pixel 2 to launch. We're talking about, is it worth upgrading your Pixel 2 to a Pixel 3, your iPhone 10 to a XS or XS Max? Should you rush out and upgrade? The answer is most likely no. It's not worth it. Odds are your phone from last year is still humming along in near perfect form, not causing any issues, and is really only outdated when you stand beside someone holding a phone released yesterday. Does this mean you shouldn't go to the latest and greatest? Absolutely not. If you can afford and justify it, go nuts. Even if you're just justifying it to yourself. If you want the latest and greatest, go for it. Who am I to stop you? There's always a way to justify buying the latest and greatest phone. My advice to you is just don't feel like you have to because the manufacturer says stupid things on stage like, "This is the best phone we've ever designed." Remember, if it wasn't the best phone that they'd ever designed, Apple, Samsung, then they wouldn't be on stage telling you you need to rush out and buy the latest and greatest phone tomorrow when it launches. Thanks guys! So if you didn't like today's video, give it a thumbs down, but if you liked it, hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, don't forget to hit the notification bell to make sure that you know when we've got a new video out. Thanks very much, have a great day.